this video, let's talk about something called AJAX, what exactly the AJAX is and what kind of problem does it solve, right? So let's begin and let's try and understand this. And maybe later on, we will basically create a project, a very simple project called Movie Search app with the help of AJAX itself. But first, let us try and understand what exactly the AJAX is. We'll see a few examples and then we'll move on to the project part. Okay, so let's begin. So AJAX basically stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So these two keywords are important in here. First is asynchronous and XML. Let's try and understand this. But before we jump into that, let's try and understand what exactly the AJAX is. So a lot of beginners, a lot of people sometimes confuse that what exactly the AJAX is. Is it a library? Is it a framework? Or what exactly it is, right? So as you can see right over here, it is actually a web technique, right? It is just a technique, right? And what does this technique do? It is used to send and receive data from a server asynchronously. So asynchronously right over here simply signifies that the data is being fetched in the background, right? It does not block any other task. So for example, if you're surfing a website or a web app and you're doing something, you're interacting with the website, and at the same time, let's say if AJAX call is being made, then that AJAX call is not going to block the any other behavior which is there onto the web application, right? So it is, the whole job is done asynchronously, that is kind of in the background, right? And another feature is, apart from being asynchronous, the whole thing works without reloading the entire web page, right? So basically what you're doing is you are making a request from the client to the server, and this and you are able to receive the data from the server, and you can display that data basically without reloading our entire web page, right? So we'll discuss about this point with the help of something like conventional client server architecture which is there, and we'll talk about the AJAX model, where does AJAX model fits in. So we'll talk about that right now. Before jumping into all of those explanation, let's try and understand few of the examples, or let's try and see few of the use cases where the AJAX is being used directly, and you might be using or interacting with the help of AJAX in your day-to-day life. So for example, let's say you're loading new comments. So for example, let's say you are on Twitter, and when you look for the comments, only let's say 10 comments are being displayed. But if you click see more, let's say, right, or load more, for example, right, so you get more comments, and that does not essentially reloads the whole page, right? So that happens asynchronously without reloading the web page. So again, at that point, we are actually using something called AJAX, right? Then similarly, you might have come across updating likes, for example, right, on Facebook. If you click on the like button, it gets incremented, and that happens again without reloading a web page, right? You're fetching the search result, let's say, right? You heads on to Google, let's say, and you are trying to search for something. Now that search result is being displayed asynchronously. So let me show this right in here. So first of all, let's take the example of Unsplash. So Unsplash is basically open source for good quality images. If you want, you can use these images. But right in here, so if you see, this is the kind of a landing page for Unsplash. And if I scroll, so this is the infinite page, right? And what exactly happens in here, the images are like the next 20 images are being fetched asynchronously. That is in the background, and they are added, and that whole flow basically makes this page infinite, right? It's a kind of infinite scroll. But this is like this fetching of next 20 images that happens through the network call which are being made in the background. So if I just scroll, and if I just go down, you can see right in here the API calls are being made, and the next 12 images are being fetched, right? So it works like that, right? So you can see it's kind of a never-ending page, because in the background those images are being fetched, right? And it's not blocking anything, right? The calls are not blocking any other behavior, right? So it's a very, very smooth experience, and this is the only reason like why the single page application framework such as React or Angular or Vue.js, they focus on AJAX to make any sort of API calls, right? So that is another thing. Now let me also show you the example of Google. So if you search in anything in here, now again the API calls are being made in background. So for example, if I search for JavaScript right in here, so you can see the background API calls are being made to show you the recommended search result, right, or the recommendations in here. So again, this is what AJAX in action is, right? Now, let's try and understand more into it, like what is exactly going on behind the scene. So if we talk about traditional client server model, wherein we have something like client and we have things like server, right? And client can basically make a request, server will basically respond. Now, in this case, server basically respond with something like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So it is literally sent by the server, and that is being actually parsed by the client and actually being displayed to you, right? So in this case, we are actually receiving the whole HTML, CSS, the whole page, which is being built at the server end and is sent to the client. Client simply renders it, right? So that is what the conventional model is. The whole page, everything, the data, etc., is being created at the server end and it's being sent to the client. And client's role is simply to display that data or to render that data. So that is what the conventional client server architecture is, conventional client server model is. But when we talk about AJAX model, right? So in AJAX model, we can again send the request, and now in this case server basically responds with the data. Server never responds with the help of never respond with something like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? It actually simply gives you data, and the data can be in different format, right? So now how this thing works behind the scene. So what happens is, right in here onto the front end, you can say there is this thing that is a JavaScript layer which is in action, right? So client do not interact, or your browser do not interact directly to the server, right? So it interact with the help of JavaScript. So this whole thing basically act as a client, right? So this is your whole client, wherein there is a JavaScript layer which help us make the AJAX calls, right? So that is what AJAX model is, and in this we receive the data. We never receive HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So once we have received the data, with the help of JavaScript, something like DOM manipulation, very basically, right? So with the help of things like DOM manipulation, we can display that data and we can basically show that data to the client. So that is how this whole process works. So we simply receive the data, and with the help of things like DOM manipulation, we can display that data. So things like React and Angular, they also does the same thing. They also does that DOM manipulation by themselves, and they simply show that data to the browser or to the client side. So that is how it works. Now, one more thing to note about is, like, there are different data formats which are being used. So one of the data format is XML. So it is one of the like older data format which was being used in this AJAX model, and hence the name AJAX, right? If we so this has come from that thing itself, right? So hence the name asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So this was one of the older data format. Then the latest data format, or the most usable data format, is JSON data format, which is JavaScript object notation. So this is very similar to like writing JavaScript objects. It's like more intuitive, right? And if we talk about XML, so XML is more like a HTML kind of structure, right? And so in order to parse the data in XML, you literally have to build something like a DOM, and DOM is a kind of an expensive object, right? It occupies a lot of memory. The parsing is slow. Hence, XML is not recommended these days, and we use things like JSON, right, which provides better capabilities, right? And it's kind of lightweight. So that is another format. Then we sometimes also use text and HTML if we want to, exchange small fragments of data. So that is also there, right? Now, let's dive in and let's try and understand how we can basically make AJAX calls from the client side, right? So there are multiple ways using which you can actually make the request. So the first is basically with the help of a traditional XML HTTP request, right? So XML HTTP request. So this is the traditional way of making a request. Second is something called fetch, right? So fetch is actually promise based, right? So this is the latest way, or this is the recommended way of making AJAX request. So this is promise based. This is kind of callback based, right? So we already know that promises are kind of preferred over callbacks because of issues in callbacks, things like callback hell, or let's say inversion of control, right? So the callbacks are not that recommended. So there are promises versions are available, something like fetch, which can help us make the AJAX call very easily from the comfort of JavaScript, right? Then there are third-party libraries, you might have heard about something like axios, right? So axios also exist, right? And which can help us make the AJAX request from the comfort of JavaScript. So let's see each one of these one by one, and let's try and understand how exactly we can make an AJAX call. So, which is absolutely fine. Now what I'll do is I'll simply create an HTML file first of all. So let's do that quickly. HTML5. Let's create a script.js, and what I can do is I can just say script. I can basically attach my script, and let's say AJAX. Okay, and let me open this with live server, right? So this is fine. Let's open the console as well. Let me just zoom in a little bit, right? And this is all right. Now let's try and understand how we work with that traditional XML HTTP request and how that works. Let's just quickly see that. So XML HTTP request, if you just go to MDN, XML HTTP request, MDN, right? So you can see XML HTTP request object are used to interact with the server. You can retrieve data from the URL without having to do a full page refresh. So it is kind of one of the way which was used earlier to make the request. So let's quickly use that. So what I'll do is I'll create that object, that XML HTTP request object, and then we can basically initialize that request. So we can use this method called open, right? And this accepts the type or the HTTP method by which you want to make a request. So I will use HTTP GET method, and let's use some API. So what I'll do is we have a fake store API right in here, which is used to retrieve all the products. So fake store basically provide like sample APIs, which you can just plug in into your application to play around, right? So you can see there is this API which actually returns the products data, right? Array of products, and this is fine. Now what I'll do is I'll just make a call to this API, right? So I'll put that endpoint in here, which is absolutely fine. Now, so let's attach the callback. So as I said, it's a callback based library. So if the data is loaded, right, the request is loaded successfully, or the request is sent successfully, then this callback is kind of executed. And let's simply print this in here, and let's simply make a request. So you'll have to call this send method, which will actually make sure the request is sent to the fake store server. So this is a kind of AJAX request that we are trying to make with the help of things like XML HTTP request. Now, as soon as I save, you can see a request is being made and we are getting something. Now, what I want to see is something called response text, right? So you can see that whole response, right, is being fetched with the help of XML HTTP request, and it's kind of printed in here in the text format. We can parse this into a usable JavaScript object, and then maybe we can use the DOM manipulation to display this whole product related information that we are getting from fake store. So this is one of the easiest way, or one of the oldest way, which was being used earlier to make the AJAX call. Now let's go and try to use something called fetch, right? So fetch is basically a newer, it's a web API provided by the browser, and it helps us make the HTTP request in it, like using a promises way, right? So what I can simply do is fetch, and by default fetch makes the get call. You do not need to specify the method in here, but if you want to make, let's say, the post call, then you can specify the method as well. So in this case, we are making a get call, it's fine, and the fetch is going to return the promise, right? So I'm going to chain on the .then and .catch, and inside the .then, I'll simply say response and console.log response, right? And let's say catch is if there is any error, we'll catch that and we'll print that error, right? So as simple as that. If we just go in here and look at, so you can see we are getting a status as 200. That means we are getting a success response. But where are the movies, right? We should ideally get the movies, right? If we see, there is something called response body, right? And it's a readable stream. So what is the readable stream? Now, fetch basically does not loads the data in one go, right, in the memory. So it loads the data in chunks by chunks, right? So we get a readable stream. Now from this readable stream, it's kind of a source of the data. And from this readable stream, if we want to read all of the data, then we can basically call the method called response.json. So that will basically help us parse that whole data into a JavaScript object, and this also returns a promise. So what I'll do is I'll simply call response.json. So we are getting a response, and then this is being done in order to in order to fetch all the data and pass it into a JavaScript object, right? So I can again chain on one more dot then, because response.json also returns a promise, and I'll simply say data, and I'll print the data in here. What is the value of data? So we go and we expand, you can see we are getting that whole array right in here. Right now, what I can just do is I can loop over this array, and maybe we can use DOM manipulation and fetch all the display all the movies and the related information. So this was all about fetch. Now, since it is promise based, we can also use things like async await syntax, which will even make it more cleaner, right? All right. Now let us try to use axios, right? So axios is basically is the HTTP client, right? You can see it's a promise based HTTP client for making requests. Now we go and see the examples. So you can see, we can simply say axios.get, and we can specify the endpoint wherein we want to make a call. So let's try to use axios. So what I'll do is I'll grab the CDN for the axios, and maybe I'll simply say GitHub. And if we go to this, let's go and figure out the CDN. Okay, so here it is. Now let me just copy the CDN and place it in here. And if you go and if you simply write axios, you should get this output. That means axios has been added to your web page, right? Now, what I can simply do is I can just use axios now, right? As simple as that. And we can simply say axios.get, and I want to again make a call to the fake store itself, and it simply returns a promise, right? And in this, you do not need to do that response.json that you were doing in case of fetch, right? So you can directly print the response, and that is it, right? If you want, you can have that dot catch, but let's not do that in here. Let's simply see what we are getting. So we expand this. You can see we are getting a status as 200. That means the request was success. And if we expand the data property in here, you can again see the whole data, right? So if I just write response on data, you can again see the whole data. So this is again being done with the help of third-party library that is Axios in here. So this is all about the making an AJAX call from the comfort of JavaScript, and we are able to receive the data, right? So for example, like this thing is fine, right? So we are able to get the data. Now, how we can display it to the client, that is our choice. So that kind of freedom comes with AJAX. Now, let's go and try to create a movie search app in which basically we'll fetch the shows. So this is TV Maze. Now, TV Maze gives you a lot of endpoints to search for the results. So for example, this endpoint will give you all the shows whose name has this word girls, right? So you can see, let's go in here, let's try and understand. Okay, so the show name is girls. Let's see the second one. This is also girls, and this also include girls. Now let's now go and create a folder called movie search app, right? And let's create a index.html file, and again script.js. And in this, we are going to use basically the axios. So let me just bring in the axios from the previous HTML file, and let's attach this thing. Now, create a movie search app. What we will do is we'll first have a kind of we'll create a simple interface wherein, let's say, there is a simple form, right? You can just, and we have a button, right? You can just type in something, right? And once you click on the search button, right, you should be able to get all the result and you should be able to display it, right? So that is what I'm gonna do right in here. We're not going to focus much on styling, right? So what I can just do is I can simply say H1 movie search app, and let's say we have a section. Inside the section, let's say we have a form, right? And this form will be having an input type text, and let's say placeholder should be search, right? And we can have a submit button, right? So type is submit, and let's call it search button, right? And then whatever the result that we will get, we can maybe display that result or put that result inside another section, and I'll give it an ID of result, right? And this is the ID of container, let's say, right? So this is absolutely fine. Now, if we open this with live server, so this is what we get, right in here. You can just enter your movie and you can just click on search, right? If you want, you can use Bootstrap to make it more fancier, right? But that's not the focus at the moment, right? So now, first let us try and understand how we can basically grab what user want to search. So what before that, let's first select the relevant elements. So first of all, let me just select the form document dot. Let's say I'll use query selector, maybe query selector, and I would say form, and then I would simply say result section, right? Document dot get element by ID, and the ID is result, right? As simple as that. Now what I can just do is I can add an event, that is a submit event, and I can execute a function console log off, let's say form submitted, right? Like that. So let's open the console, and if I just go in here, type something, click on search, you can see for a fraction of a second we are getting a form submitted. Why? And why it disappears? So this is because as soon as you submit the form, the browser reloads, and that's the default behavior of the form. And if you want to, so that basically defeats the whole purpose of single page application. It's getting reloaded, right? Even when you click the form. So we do not want this functionality because we want a single page application that should load the data asynchronously without reloading the web page. So what I can do is I can capture the event object in here, and I can simply say event.prevent default. So that will make sure the default behavior does not kick in as you submit the form, right? So you can see it's not, it does not disappear anymore. Now now what we have to do is we have to basically grab what the user is searching for. So for example, if you're searching for something like girls, and if you hit enter, we should be able to grab this text so that we can put inside our TV Maze API right in here and grab the result, right? So for example, if I put something like Spider-Man right in here, so we'll get the result related to the Spider-Man, right? So you can see Spider-Man like that. So how we can do that? So we can use something like uh, form dot elements, right? Let's see what is form dot elements. So form dot elements are basically, the first element is the actual input which is there inside our form, right? So this one. So what I can do is I can just say I'll just pick the 0th element, which is the input, and I'll simply call dot val onto it, right? So if I search for something like Spider-Man, and if I hit enter, you can see we are able to grab that text. So what I'll do is I'll just store uh, this text inside a variable like this. And then what we can do is we can basically create a method fetch shows, right? Like that. And we can basically pass the argument that is a show name for which you want to search the results, right? So now what I can just do is I can simply say, let me use async and await syntax in here. And let's just put in try and catch so that if we run into errors, we should be able to catch and print them accordingly. Error. And what I'll do is I'll simply say axios.get, right? So axios also, like since it returns the promise, we can put in dot catch and dot net. Now what I'll do is let's use backticks in here. So we have the endpoint, but at this place, what we want is we want a show name variable. So what I'll just do is I'll just say show name. like this. So this, as soon as you call fetch shows, we will get the data. And once the data is available, we can then display that data, right? So let me just capture the data that we are getting and let's print that data for now. Response.data. So let's go and let's search for Spider-Man and hit enter. So, okay, we are not calling the fetch shows. Let's call it. All right. So we are now passing the search text in here, and that should give the results, right? So you can see we are now getting the results right in here for this keyword, that is Spider-Man. Now, what I can do is I can just use another method to basically show or display that data. So what I'll just do is I'll simply say display results, right? And to display the result, we'll basically put the result inside our result section that I have already selected. Now we will get, the results, let's say. So what I'll do is I'll simply say for let item of results. And what I can just do is I can basically create an image. So we can use a DOM API, that is create element, to create the image, and then we can set the attribute to this image. So what I'm trying to actually do is, so we have basically the links in here. So for example, if you expand this, so inside each show there is the show property, and there is this property called image, and then we have medium, right? So before doing this, let's just print what we have. So console log item dot show dot image dot medium, right? So if I search for Spider-Man, then you can see we are not calling the display results. Let's call that and pass the response.data in here. Okay, so Spider-Man, and you can see we are actually getting all the links. And now what I'll do is I'll just use the set attribute method to set that image URL inside the source of the image, right? So, but sometimes what can also happen is that image might not be there, right? So I'll make sure that only if this exists, then this should happen, right? So we have the medium, or we can say we have the image, then only we will simply say image source, and it would be that, right? And now what I can just do is I can just say the image source should have the value that is this source that we are getting from the like this image.medium, right? So that will basically set the image. Now, since this image has been created dynamically, we need to add the image to the result section as well. So what I'll do is I'll simply say result section dot append, and I'll append the image, right? Like this. So if I search for something like Spider-Man, and if I hit enter, you can see we are able to append all the results in here, right? So it's like that. So this is fine. Now, if I search for something like shows like girls, right? So you will see that data has been added at the end, right? Because we are not refreshing a web page. So whatever the data which was added by the first search, it is still there, right? And when you're doing a second search, we are simply appending the data, right? So if you want, what we can do right over here is, so before displaying the result, right, we can clean up our result section, and we can get rid of the previous result. So what we can simply do for now at least is, so for example, if result.section, so there would be like images inside the result section, right? So if I expand this one, you'll see there are images. So what I can simply write is, if that result section, that means if this one has first child, right? If the first child is there, then result section dot first child dot remove. So it'll remove all the childs unless there is a first child, right? So that will basically make sure that we remove the previous result, right? Like that. So this is fine. Let's now give it a shot. If we search for girls, we are getting that result. And if we search for something like Spider-Man, we are getting Spider-Man. And this is happening without refreshing a web page, right? So that is what the power of Ajax is, and it is being utilized in things like React, Angular, etc. So I hope this was helpful in understanding what exactly the Ajax is, and maybe we can like drill down more into it and understand how it works in React. So comment below, and I'll maybe make more videos around these kind of topics. And yeah, this was it in this video.